Chris Mackowski of Emerging Civil War for the American Battlefield Trust. We're continuing our trip through Franklin. We were in the thick of it earlier today at the Carter House, a place you should go and visit and stand in those footsteps because the story there is incredible. And now we're going to walk in more footsteps as we explore the eastern side of this battlefield. We've shifted over to a new location, and to walk in those footsteps, I'm going to bring on Eric Jacobson. He is the CEO of the Battle of Franklin Trust, and he has got a great treat for us. Eric, tell us, where are we walking and what are we going to see?
So we are just south of Carnton. This is really one of the coolest but also most sobering areas of the battlefield because so much of Franklin's ground was lost years ago. This is really a place where I think even Ed Barr said to me once, you can get a sense of space and time. It was something like that where there's this wide open area, and Loring's men, part of A.P. Stewart's corps, are advancing across this ground. So A.P. Stewart comes into the battle with about 9,500 men. William Loring, who had started his career out east, he'd been at Vicksburg. Well, actually, he never got to Vicksburg. He peeled away at Champion Hill. So Loring comes into this battle with about 3,500 men, Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana troops. But let's start heading this direction, and you can really get a sense of, again, how topography plays an important part on every Civil War battlefield. But at Franklin, you don't get a sense of this if you're just at Carter House or you just go to visit Carnton. So you got to come out, look at this ground as we're heading up out of what I call a defilade position. So Loring's men have crossed a creek that's kind of behind us to my left. And as they start to come out of this low ground and they hit the top of this ridge, you can see the trees beginning to emerge in front of us. And all hell breaks loose because Loring's men almost immediately start coming under artillery fire. On a straight line, we're a mile from the left flank of the U.S. position. Behind the left flank, 3 batteries, a total of 14 guns. Battery M, 4th U.S., Battery G, 1st Ohio, Battery D, 1st Ohio, and they begin raining fire down on Loring's men. Solid shot, percussion, case shot, everything they can throw at them at long range. Off to my right is Carnton. That becomes a field hospital almost immediately as the wounded begin to be hauled from these fields up toward the house. But Loring's men press on. So about 15 or 16 years ago, very little had been saved in Franklin. This tract of ground had been preserved. But off to the north was 110 acres. It had been a golf course and a country club for years. I remember on my first visit to Franklin seeing people playing tennis and playing golf adjacent to Carnton, adjacent to the cemetery. And it just struck me as not only odd, it just struck me as wrong that the battlefield hadn't just been lost. It had been covered up with all of this, just kind of modern nonsense. And it just seemed inappropriate at a place like this. So we're still following Loring's advance, shells streaking in. Think about this. Those batteries I just mentioned over the course of 4 hours flung almost 1,500 rounds into Loring's men, Edward Walthall's division, which is on Loring's left flank. There are casualties all over this field. And so those 15 or 16 years ago, when this property came up for sale, Franklin's Charge, a local coalition involving Carter House and Carnton, American Battlefield Trust, and the city of Franklin all banded together, and we saved it. We bought it for $5 million. The Battle of Franklin had been so forgotten, so completely ignored. There were people honestly saying to us at the time, nothing happened there. Nothing ever happened there. All the fighting was right at the Carter House, which was the oddest argument I'd ever heard because I was like, how could you fit 40,000 men into that area right around the Carter House? That's how much the story had been forgotten. And I remember when I was writing my first book and writing about Loring's advance, and really the entirety of A.P. Stewart's corps, and thinking, nothing happened? Stewart ended up losing almost 3,000 men. Loring himself lost almost 1,000 on this ground. And the casualties, so we've now come probably just a couple of hundred yards. Loring has at least another mile to advance. and he's already just taking one casualty after another with every step, and it's inflicting heavy casualties. A guy in the 33rd Mississippi named Marcus Stevens said the first shot from the Yankee guns took 7 guys out of his company. Alabama soldiers said it took the Yankee artillerists 3 shots to get the range. He said first one streaked over our heads, second one exploded right in front of us, third one popped right above us. Casualties again beginning to increase. Now the guys begin to move quicker. Somewhere in this area they probably pick up the pace and start going from this steady cadence that we're following up to almost a double quick, because pretty soon they're going to come under small arms fire. This is a spot I think worth stopping at. We kind of pan around to give everyone some perspective. Due north, Carter House is that direction, so that's the way we're going. We've come from the south and the southeast. Off to my left is Carnton. Wounded are streaming back across these fields already, being taken to the historic home. But right here, off to my right, is what is today the McGavock Confederate Cemetery. It should be relatively obvious that wasn't there on November 30th, 1864. Some of William Loring's men, let's walk that way, as they came across these fields, particularly his Mississippi troops, because Mississippi's almost a quarter of the entire cemetery, they literally walked over their own graves. They came right through this area, plowing toward the U.S. defensive position. So to fast forward to more recent years, as we begin to develop what is known as Eastern Flank Battlefield Park. So we bought the country club. We spent years working on a plan and initial design phases, and we opened it to the public. It's been open now for about 12 or 13 years. And, you know, guests today, they would never know it was a golf course, especially if they're not from Franklin. They have no idea. To them, it's always been just a park. And I think it's so satisfying to be able to have this ground that we're walking on, but also this other 110 acres. So we've been talking for maybe 4 or 5 minutes. We've now walked probably 400 or 500 yards, and we've still got almost 3/4 of a mile to go. To me, I'll make another Gettysburg reference. It's the only place in Franklin where you can get a sense of space and time like you can there, and think about what happened on July 3rd, 1863. It's the same kind of experience here, because every step gets you closer to your goal and your objective, and every step gets you closer to death, maiming, and awful kind of suffering. It's just such an incredible, and as I said, really cool, but really sobering place as the final, episodes of the war are playing out. As we cut through this little spot in the fence, we're going to take a look at the Confederate Cemetery, and you can get a sense of just some of the cost of just one of the sides. Almost 1,500 men would be buried here about 1.5 years after the war concluded. So as the federal government begins to establish national cemeteries, local groups, families, associations banded together to deal with death, to deal with the dead. And what you see here is really a very special place. And it would be maintained by the family that lived at Carnton, John and Carrie Mackowski, for the rest of their lives. So it really is just a very special place.
Now, Eric, earlier you had mentioned 40,000 people concentrated around the Carter House as we continue in that direction. And I want to tie that back to your comments about topography. Because of the way the Union line is positioned in semicircular fashion around the village and the bends of the Harpeth River, it funnels those Confederates into a concentrated point. Does that help them or does that hurt them?
It hurts them tremendously, because as Loring's men are advancing, see, the river is off to my left, but then the river turns sharply. So what happens is Loring and Walthal's men kind of begin to converge, and it begins to be this huge, just mass of Confederate troops that bang up against the left flank. I would argue that the reason that they do not have the success, for example, that Claiborne and Brown do in the middle, isn't because Stuart's men are not as good. It's that they just encounter this ferocious artillery fire. They're being broken up early on. They don't have Wagner's men shielding them all the way in, and they're so funneled. It becomes, as one Federal soldier, almost like a hideous turkey shoot, and they're just laying waste to Stuart's men. I think this is one of the most special places on the field because it's so easy to focus just on what happened in the middle and, you know, the 6 Confederate generals and what did Hood do and why did he do this. But what's happening over here to Stuart's men and Loring's in particular is just really powerful.
And reminder, thanks Eric, reminder that we will be hopefully shooting a video to get into a little bit more of the story of Carnton and why is it called Carnton and who lived there and this cemetery on a separate video. For now though, I just want to say that, you know, William Wing Loring is one of those guys who survived the battle. In a battle so deadly to Confederate generals, he's going to survive. He's going to, eventually leave the country. He's going to spend the better part of a decade in the Egyptian army. He's going to come back, make a political run, eventually die in New York City. How do I know that? How was I reminded of that? On the awesome social media channels of the Carter House in Carnton and on their YouTube channel. I reread that this morning. So go ahead and check out those channels. Like and follow those Facebook pages, Carter House in Carnton, and go to the Battle of Franklin Trust on YouTube, and I think you're going to be really happy with what you find. Eric, anything else?
No, I think that's it. Just, you know, come out and visit, see this ground, walk it for yourself, come and see the cemetery, visit Carnton. It's really, I can't say it enough. It's one of the most special places, I think, of anything related to the American Civil War.
We have been privileged to have you with us, Eric. This has been a great time. We've got one more video before we wrap things up because we're going to continue to explore some of the iconic spots here at Franklin. That coming up in just a moment. For Gary, for Chris White behind the camera, who did fantastic stunt work, filming and walking across that field, and to Eric, thank you so much. I'm Chris Mackowski. Thank you for being with us, and thank you for supporting Battlefield Preservation.